It is a real honor to introduce Jan Johnson to close out our series for 2019-2021. And I really want to express my gratitude to both Jan and Marcus for setting this all up. We have had dress rehearsals and practice runs, and I can't say enough how smoothly it's all gone with Marcus managing the technical aspect, which is just brilliant. I first met up with Jan a few years ago in my role as the volunteer coordinator at UVM for the Master Gardener program, and Jan spoke at the statewide Master Gardener Conference down in Londonderry, Vermont, and she was introducing her book at the time, Spirit of Stone, which I have. And I'll just say that this is such a beautifully illustrated book and a beautifully written book. And it's one of three that Jan has written. Her first book was called Heaven is a Garden, and she's going to be focusing on the content of her newest book that came out last year called Gardentopia. Jan has a number of awards that, to her credit, in her 30-year career as a landscape architect and designer. She was awarded an Instructor of Merit from the New York Botanical Garden education program. She writes for Garden Design magazine, contributes articles regularly to that publication. She received the Merit Award from the Association for Professional Landscape Designers. And one of the things that really drew me to Jan and kind of influenced the fact that I follow her religiously now and voraciously take up any piece of advice she offers is that she got her start in Japan as a student, and that heavily influenced her work and her career. And so the theme of her work over the 30 years that she's been in the horticultural industry has been that gardens influence our body, mind, and spirit. And it's that kind of spiritual part and wellness and well-being about gardening that Jan likes to promote and likes to incorporate into her work in the field and in her presentations. So I know you're going to really enjoy listening to what she has to say. She's energetic, entertaining, and has amazing content to share with us. So Jan, welcome to Norwich.
Thank you. Well, you know, yesterday I was supposed to be driving to New Hampshire. I had it on my calendar, and well, that didn't happen. So now we're Zooming. I have never done this before, but so I want to get some feedback to see if it all works out. And I just want to let you know that today's presentation is based, like Cindy said, on my latest book, which is Gardentopia. It looks backwards to me. Is that backwards to you? No. So Gardentopia is 135 design basics for creating beautiful outdoor spaces. And this book came about out of my classes that I taught. I taught for 7 years a graduate landscape design program at Columbia University, and also for over 20 years design classes at New York Botanic Gardens. And in each of my classes, invariably someone would raise their hand, they would know all about plants, and they would say to me, what are the rules? They wanted to know the rules of garden design. And I said, you know, there are no rules. You have to know scale and proportion. You have to know drainage. You have to know the soil. You have to know sun. Well, that did not satisfy them. They wanted rules. And so therefore, as I was working, because I have had my own landscape design and build firm for 30 years, and we do all our projects, design and build. So when I'm on a job site, I would say, well, this could be your rule, but I don't like the word rule, so I use the word basic, design basics. So I would take a photo, think of a cute little name, and say, okay, here's a rule. And I put them together in a PowerPoint for my students, and it was very popular. Well, after I had amassed about 40 of these, I thought, you know, I should share this with a wider audience. And that's how my book Gardentopia came about. And so like I said, 135. I'm not sharing with you 135 today, lucky you, but I'm going to share some fun ones and see how it goes. Now, I'm not, in my talks, when I'm in person, I do slight interactive. In this case, I can't, because it would be kind of hard. So when I ask certain questions, which I will, just answer it in your head. We'll see how it goes. And if you want any to discuss anything, please note it down so we can chat at the end. And lastly, I don't know, did people get the handout? Marcos, do you know if people got the handout?
I do know that it was sent out to everybody. So it was sent out in the registration email. There was an attached PDF on that that was sent to you.
So if you care, the PDF has the names of the plants that I feature in my talk today. This talk is really not so much about plants as it is about garden design basics. But I do talk about plants, and I wanted you to have that so that if you like a particular plant that I showcase, you can check it off on the handout you have, or Google it if it's on your computer. So I hope you find that. And with that, let us see if I can share this with you all. So in this era of environmental degradation, we have to be aware of planting vibrant, eco-friendly gardens, rain gardens, native plants, pollinator gardens. And in our zeal to do that, which we have to as gardeners, we're kind of at the front lines of our environmental awareness. Sometimes I wonder if people get so excited about planting the butterfly weeds and all that, that they forget about creating beauty at the same time. And so I want you just to remember all that at the same time as you're creating these beautiful native gardens and whatever else you plant. So that is why the name of it is Design Basics for Creating Beautiful Outdoor Spaces. Beauty surrounds us, but we usually need to be walking in a garden to know it. Isn't that a wonderful quote? And so that is what I'm talking about, beauty. Now, when you mention beautiful gardens to people, of course, the first thing they might conjure up are rose gardens, and roses are beautiful. You see here where I show the name Rosa rugosa? That is on your handout, so that you know the names of the plants. I do note them. That's a beautiful one. So rose gardens are beautiful, but you know what? This is also beautiful, isn't it? This is at Mohawk Mountain House, and what makes this so beautiful? Well, is it the shape of the roof? Is it the quality of the early morning light? Is it the green against that shimmering water? Well, you know, it's all of that. That is beautiful. And this is beautiful. This is all shades of green. You know, the matte pot versus the shiny pot, the textures, the quality of the dark green plants to the light green plants. Isn't that beautiful? This is in a parking lot in Seattle, Washington. I took this photo. Can you imagine if all the parking lots look like this? Oh my goodness. Well, this brings up how I'm going to present the rest of the talk. So this is in the book, and it's a design tip, planter in a bed. Very simple, very easy. If you have established plant beds in your yard, and you don't want to tear them out, one thing you can do is just place a planter in an open space. In this case, I found this planter behind the people's shed. It was just lying there. And I grabbed it, and we had just planted this. I took out a boxwood plant, put down a little stone that I found, and placed the planter right there in the bed. And as the seasons change, you can change the flower display. And look at this one. I wonder if you've all been to Coastal Maine Botanic Gardens. It's one of the greatest botanic gardens in the country, in my opinion. Coastal Maine Botanic Gardens in Boothbay Harbor, Maine. Definitely worth a visit. And you see those planters there? The beauty of the planters is that you can plant low-growing plants in the planter, and then you can see them atop the other plants. And I'm sure you want to know what that brunette plant is, the brown one. Brunette snakeroot, Actia simplex, or semicifuga. Both names are accurate, Actia and semicifuga, brunette. What a great scene you have here. But if you look around the back of the bed, like I did, this is what you see. So you get two different views, which is quite nice, isn't it? And that is blue fescue, which grows only to be about 6 to 8 inches high, but you can see it when it's planted in a pot. peeking out atop the other plants. One tip, when you're doing planter in a bed, if you put the planter straight on the ground, it might start sinking when it rains. So if you have a cracked terracotta pot lying around you don't want to use, set it upside down. It serves as a great base for the planter when you plant it inside your garden bed. Okay, I hope everybody's following along. This is one of the topics in my book, Garden Design and Artful Accents. And so this is about garden design now. So here's an example of a terrace that we put in. We had to push back the hill and build that wall to hold the soil back. Is that a nice stone wall? And so some of the design rules, design basics that are illustrated here is what I'm going to talk about. So first of all, this is called Lure of the Sheltered Corner. And what that represents is the sofa, is the sofa up against the wall. We all like to have our backs protected with a view out front. If our back is protected by a wall, a tree, a hedge, or side of the house, we feel comfortable. It's kind of like when you walk into a restaurant. Here's an example of Lure of the Sheltered Corner, except this time it's hydrangeas. I planted a bunch of hydrangeas behind this bench, and people sit there. And here again, viburnums set behind that beautiful rustic bench. If the viburnums weren't there, it would still be a beautiful place to sit, but you feel a little bit more comfortable with those behind you. And this is a more formal area, that's arborvitaes, but again, you feel better when you have your back protected. And this is so cute, isn't this? A tree fell, we cut it up, and I used the tree to make a little bench. We polished it, polyurethaned it. And this is Lure of the Sheltered Corner because it's a slope behind you that forms your backdrop. The kids sit on this waiting for the school bus. And this is a very grand Lure of the Sheltered Corner. This wall actually was existing, 1920s, and then they wanted a spa. So I said, well, let's put the spa into the existing wall, and that's what we did. Just set it right there. That's about as nestled as you can be. So you see where Lure of the Sheltered Corner is. You've got the wall to give you a little protection. But what else can we learn from this little scene? Well, here's another tip. Move the furniture. They did some studies, and they found that movable furniture is preferred over that heavy static furniture. This is at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, and people prefer to have lightweight furniture because then they can control the conversation. William White did a very famous study, and he said if you know you can move if you want to, you feel more comfortable staying put. You may not move the furniture, but at least you know you can. So how does that translate to gardens? Well, look at that. This is all very movable. My friends found these chairs at a flea market, and they painted them all these fun colors, and then the other canvas. So you don't have to have heavy furniture necessarily. Move the furniture. These are movable as well. There's Lure of the Sheltered Corner, right? Movable furniture. This is my favorite. Look at that. I love that seat. It's from Laughing Creek Productions. You can carry it with you in the garden, place it wherever you want. And I love that periwinkle color as well. Okay, so we've got Lure of the Sheltered Corner and movable furniture. What else could I possibly talk about here? Well, you see this pot? When we went to look for pots to put into this little terrace area, I said to the owner, the friend of mine, I said, we have to get rounded pots. And she said, why? I said, because we have a lot of rectangles, a lot of 90-degree corners, and we need some rounded forms because everyone loves rounded forms. They did a study and they found that we actually process in our brain rounded forms more rapidly than we do straight corners. Aren't those beautiful? So if I can, I always try to get rounded planters for a very rectangular terrace or patio. See the top one? That's a planter in a bed as well. Now, why do you think, oh, let me just mention this. This is another tip that involves rounded forms, and this is soft in the corner. I place rounded finials sometimes at corners of stone walls because it's a feng shui technique of softening a corner. And it really does work to have them right at the 90-degree corners like that, spherical objects. Now, why is it that we like rounded forms? Well, perhaps it's because we are surrounded by rounded forms in our nature. This is gomphrena. I love gomphrena. You can straw flowers, and you see they're rounded flowers, just like these. The tulips at the top, right? They're called ice green tulips. Isn't that fun? That's how they grow. The one at the lower right, popcorn viburnum, it's called popcorn because it looks like little popcorn balls. That's a viburnum. I love that plant. Of course, I start saying I love this, I love that, I love it all. But these are all rounded, whether they're little florets put together. Nature, you don't see square flowers. Nature makes everything rounded. So why else would we not love rounded forms? Like this one, rounded seed heads. This is a native plant, nodding onion, great on slopes, beautiful, but they do tend to nod, so that's why they work so well on hillsides. And that is their seed heads, rounded seed heads. And of course, we have rounded fruit. We don't have cubical fruit, we have rounded fruit, right? No wonder we love rounded forms. We're so used to them. Of course, our heads are rounded, that is true. Rounded heads, rounded fruit. So sometimes you can put the two together, and this is what you get. Isn't that fun? So, rounded forms. And look at that. I love the way they took the gourds and made the gourd. I want to do this. Made the gourds like little horns. See that? But if you look at that gourd a little closely, you will notice that it's got kind of a nice curve to it. Well, that curve is part of rounded forms, and it's called the phi spiral. This is a phi spiral on that gourd, which also goes along with why we love rounded forms. Everything in nature grows according to a phi proportion, 0.618. This is not pi, not 3.14, but phi, 0.618, the golden ratio or the divine ratio. Now you may have seen this phi spiral before, but you may not have realized that it's evident in everything in nature, the phi spiral, because that's how nature grows. Our bodies are all built according to the phi proportions. The phi spiral is everywhere. Isn't that beautiful? So how does phi work? Well, this is a square with the angle of the two corners being connected. But let's take a square that is in the phi proportion to that one, which is almost 2/3. 0.66 is 2/3. So here are two squares in phi proportion. Get another square that's almost 2/3 smaller, another one, a few more, put them together, and there's your phi spiral. So that's how it works. So you say, well, that's very interesting. What does it all mean? Well, we just have to know that everything we see is in phi proportion. And that's why we like rounded forms. We're so used to it. The waves, the horns, a ram, everything is phi. I went here, I saw this beautiful fountain. This is another great place to go. Center for Sustainable Landscapes. It's in Pittsburgh. Definitely a great place to visit. And I saw that the water here was in phi spiral. So perhaps the ubiquitous hidden mathematics of nature is the reason all beauty exists. So maybe everything that we determine to be beautiful is really mathematically based. Is that interesting? Anyway, let's go back to the backyard terrace. So we talked about the lure of the sheltered corner, move the furniture. We love rounded forms. There's one more I'd like to talk about, and that refers to those plants, Japanese forest grass, that are above the stone wall. See them there? There's hydrangeas, then Japanese forest grass, which is deer resistant, tolerates shade, and you see how nice it looks against that hard stone wall? Well, that represents what I call yin yang in the garden. This is another design tip, and what this is the idea that hard and soft, dark and light, all those opposites create a compelling scene. So you have the soft grass and the hard rock, and that's yin and yang. And we like that. We like those contrasts. We may not notice it, but here's dainty Hawera daffodils I planted at the base of a rock outcrop, hard and soft, water and stone, light and dark. You get the idea, I hope? Yin yang in the garden. And this one too, this is at one of the best public gardens in the United States, Chanticleer, outside Philadelphia. Absolutely worth a visit, absolutely. And so here is yin and yang. See all that big mushy flowers? But the stone walk being the hard surface kind of saves it, doesn't it? Otherwise it'd be one big mush. So that's yin yang. But this also represents another tip, which is hide and reveal, the mystery of the unseen. So you don't know where the walk leads. And so you're invited to explore further, and you want to say, where does this go? And here's the same idea, except in a very green space, the hostas, the hellebores, the Japanese painted ferns, the oak leaf hydrangeas. What a beautiful scene. But you see, it veers out of sight, and you go to follow it. It's a very good thing to do in a small backyard like I have. Hide and reveal. Don't let them see where you're going. Here's one I did for someone. That's actually a very elaborate deer fence. And I purposely made the pathway curved like that so you wouldn't see where it was going. So you would want to go through the gates. This is also an example of hide and reveal. This is a folly that I did. And what's interesting here, the hide and reveal is not strategically hidden by a bush or a fence. This is just in the sun and in the shade. So when you walk up, you start to see that there's some steps in the shade. You see that? Those are the steps. Covered in moss because it's in the shade. So that was hide and reveal, but look, I do love moss, I have to say. It's so beautiful. New Hampshire, you have lots of moss. But some people tend to think, oh, maybe not New Hampshire, but some people tend to think moss is a problem and they try to clean the moss off. And I say, no, no, no. Embrace the moss. If you have moss, celebrate it. Like this is a wonderful bridge in the Steinhardt Garden in Mount Kisco. This is an 85-acre private garden that is open twice a year via the open days by the Garden Conservancy. You can go here one day in the spring and one day in the fall, and it's better than any botanic gardens I've ever been to. It's really worth the trip. He's got zebras here, he's got flamingos, he's got an aviary, quite lovely. So embrace the moss. Trilliums growing right through the moss. They just planted right into the moss. Isn't that beautiful? This is mossy as well. You see the moss on the Japanese lantern, the moss on the rock, the moss on the trees. Embrace the moss. But this represents yet one more design tip I want to share with you, and that is called the principle of 3 depths. This is one of my favorite tips, and I'll tell you how it works. This is a very beautiful scene. You see the lantern in the front, that's the foreground, and you see the waterfall in the back. Of course, that's the background. But what adds interest to this is the third one, which is not the foreground, not the background, but the middle ground. And the middle ground happens to be that tree. This would be beautiful without that beautiful moss-covered tree, but that actually adds some depth and gives your eye a place to rest before it goes to the background. So you have 3 depths. Here it is again. You've got the people and the plants in the foreground. You've got the big trees in the background, but that's a fountain in the walkway there. The fountain serves as the middle ground. See that fountain? It would be beautiful without that, but it certainly added a very needed middle ground. This is at the Duke Gardens in North Carolina. Spectacular. This too is a beautiful scene, but I'm trying to illustrate what a middle ground would be. So here you have the foreground of the ferns, the background in the distance, and here I drew something in. Imagine if you put an urn. This is just an example, just to create the middle ground for your eye to stop on. That's a drawing, not a photo there. But that is exactly what I'm trying to illustrate to you. It creates a sense of more depth. And this is also an example of 3 depths. Japanese forest grass, so I should use here's my laser, is in the foreground, the stone steps the background, and this rock actually is the middle ground. 1, 2, 3. You got it? Of course, I can't hear you, but I'm still going to ask anyway. So I threw a lot at you. Usually in my talks, I say to everybody, okay, tell me what this is, tell me what that is, and you can't do that. Well, you possibly can in the chats, I'm not sure. But so I want you to answer it in your head or shout it out to the living room walls. I won't hear you, but I'll expect you know. So let's just look at this for a second. We got lure the sheltered corner, move the furniture, like rounded forms, yin yang, hide and reveal, embrace the moss, the principle of 3 depths. Okay, you ready? Here we go. Quiz time. What does that represent? Okay, don't everybody shout it out at once. Ha ha ha. Yep, you're right. Move the furniture. Isn't that great? Red chairs, blue chairs, love it. Move the furniture, lightweight chairs. You got it. That's it. Innisfree, everybody. Right here, another must-see garden. Innisfree in Millbrook, New York, Hudson Valley. Spectacular. Okay, what's this one? Well, it's called Principle of 3 Depths. Foreground, background, and I added these grass steps purposely to create a middle ground so that when you looked out, your eye had somewhere to settle before going to the background. Principle of 3 depths right there. Ready for the next one? Okay, this is easy, right? Yep. Embrace the moss. Beautiful though, right? If you find a moss-covered rock like that, you move it and show it off in the shade. This one could be several. What I wanted it, we like rounded forms, but it also could be yin yang in the garden, hard and soft, right? Hard and soft in the garden. This too could be yin yang in the garden, right? Hard and soft contrast right there. That is also Japanese forest grass. It's just not the yellow variety. And this, what does this represent? Several things, right? I was trying to illustrate the lure, the sheltered corner, because the wall is the backdrop. But you're right. It could also be move the furniture, lightweight furniture. It also could be we like rounded forms, because they are rounded. Last but not least, this is hide and reveal. So you can't see where the walkway leads. You want to go around the corner. So, how'd you do? Did you get 100%? Did you get A+? Well, at the risk of throwing too much at you, I thought I'd throw in a few more just to make it fun. So here we go. I learned how to plant flowers from a French gardener who was trained in Versailles in France. And he came to the United States. And when I got out of college, I went to work for him. And so I know how to plant flowers, lots of flowers, like this place here. Anyway, what does this represent? Well, this is the power of the portal. Any kind of entrance, and it doesn't have to be a gate. It could just be maybe two standing stones that you walk through, but it signifies a change of the outside to the inside, a different place. An arch does the same thing. When you go through the arch, you know you're entering a sanctuary or another place. So portals are very intriguing things to have in a garden. And it could be something like this kind of fun thing. This was actually, I took this photo on a sidewalk in Santa Monica. I couldn't believe that. That's Fortinia. And this is your standard beautiful arbor with the Kusa dogwood behind it. But once you walk through there, you feel like you're going someplace special. And isn't this a cool one? This is in Seattle, in somebody's yard. I love this one. It's just like a cool little craftsman's portal. You walk through to see what's on the other side. Love the color too. And this is one of my clients. They found this. It was all rusted. They fixed it all up. And then they got 2 granite pillars to put as the fence posts, gate posts. No fence, just the portal. And then you walk through and look at that. That's all Fothergilla. I love Fothergilla. Great fall color also. Love that shrub. So power of the portal can be, like we talked about, these nice lightweight metal gates that you can get and just put between 2 wood posts. Nothing elaborate, but very sweet. I really like these. Or, oh yes, and then let me show you this. Here's a great example of the portal. So my clients, they built a detached garage, as you see here on the left, and this is a pool. So we needed to have a pool fence and gate by code. We had to do it. So normally most people would say, okay, let's put the gate connecting from the face of the new garage to the corner of the house. But I said, no, don't do that. Let's push the gate and fence back. Let's push it back to the end. And by doing that, it creates a little intermediate zone in the center. The gate stops the eye, making the small space appear larger. And that's how it turned out. Is that nice? We could have done it the other way, but that created a little kind of ante-room that you go through. And then we painted the posts dark green like that. And so that is the power of the portal, and you have to know where to locate that portal as well. Well, here's another more fun one. This is exclamation points, columnar plants, poles, tutors, obelisks. This is in the Cold Spring Stonecrop garden in Cold Spring, which is yet another wonderful garden. Stonecrop garden, open to the public. And these are tutors or obelisks, but I'd call them tutors. And what's so interesting about them is that you can train things like mandevilla on them, as you see on the left. And they create a little bit of that yin and yang contrast, which is the tall, pointy thing in the middle of all these beautiful plants. Very effective, somewhat like planter in a bed. And here are 3 different examples. This is sky pencil holly, a great columnar accent in a garden bed. I bought these from, I'm trying to trellis trellis structures online, trellis structures. I bought 3 of them, painted them fire engine red, stuck them in front of a White House just to have some interest, you know, pointed interest. And this is industry. Look at pointed rocks sticking straight up, just some pointed rocks, anything pointed, just to create that contrast. And this is in Wave Hill in the Bronx in New York, another amazing garden, Wave Hill. And here you go, 1, 2, 3, 4 pointed objects. But what other design basics do you think this might represent? I'm waiting. Of course, I can't hear the answer. But anyway, so one of it might be, we love rounded forms with the rounded urn, or it could be principal ground, middle ground, background, right? And then here's the other rounded forms. You see 1, 2, these are U's that are beautifully pruned. 1, 2, 3, 4 rounded forms. They also represent something else, those 4 U's. Let's see if I can. Oh. Ray, repetition in the landscape. That's what they represent. We love to repeat forms like these obelisks and the bushes because it creates a power and strength. So if 1 flowering urn is good, why not place 3 of them? There's planter in a bed with repetition. Or try these. Here, I put these terracotta pots and I intended to fill them and plant them. And the lady who lived there said, no, she liked them empty. So we just kept them empty, just like that. Repetition. Same thing here with plant material. Just don't, if you think 3 are good, well, then maybe 6 are better. Just repeat them all you want. It makes a statement. It doesn't get too messy. Well, in my book, I don't just talk about garden design tips. I have other chapters. One is on theme gardens, which I adore. And so I just wanted to, without just sticking to design tips, I wanted to throw in some other fun ideas from the book. Theme gardens is one. Of course, the very first one you have to consider these days is pollinator gardens. Our bees, our butterflies, all our insects are disappearing at an alarming rate. We have to do our part to keep them healthy and happy. So whether you plant butterfly weed or bottlebrush buckeye or provide little homes for them, that's probably the most important theme I can think of, pollinator garden. But there are other themes to have fun with. One is tropical splash. I love that theme because people like, especially in the summer, to have some tropical flavor to their garden, such as these canna lilies, Pretoria, or caladiums, which thrive in the shade. Now you have to, you can't let these go over the winter. They have to be dug up and kept in a warm or semi-warm basement, not too warm. These are called temperennials. They are not hardy in our area, but you can hold them over with some peat moss in a shoebox, stick them in there. But if you don't want to go to that trouble, here's a tropical feel with Jack Frost, Heartleaf Brunera, and all the different varieties that they have now of these silvery, beautiful, large leaf plants. Also, you can do begonias. That's a very tropical feel. Add to that some ostrich ferns, and you've got a semi-tropical feeling right here. Very lush, large leaves. Looks great in the summer. Tropical splash. Oh, yes. Bergenia. This is another kind of tropical looking plant, but very hardy. And this variety of Bergenia, the red, is winter glow. When it gets cold, this is the color it turns. Isn't that great? And you contrast that with Amsonia, the native blue star, Amsonia with the blue flowers. But Amsonia has that great, great fall color and that kind of very thin foliage. Great example of yin and yang. Big leaves, kind of thick, very thin yellow leaves of Amsonia. Winter glow Bergenia, look it up. this is a theme I love, because into the Moonlight theme, because what that is that many people work, they come home, the only time they really look out the window is when they're home, and it's like 7 o'clock when they look outside. And so if you have white leaves or white flowers and it's a full moon night in the summer, everything seems to be luminous, like this dappled willow. Now, dappled willow is a shrub that can take over and grow into small trees. So in order to make it white like this, you have to prune it constantly. I was actually pruning dappled willow this morning. The new growth is white leaves like this. So it is a lot of maintenance, but it sure does look pretty.
Jan, this is Marcos. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're just about 10 minutes.
Okay, I'm on target. Yep. And this is white Aphrodite hosta, beautiful scent, August lily. Definitely, if you can find Aphrodite, is an old favorite flower, hosta. And you can do white planters. Look at these. White planters with Dusty Miller and that Silverberry Supertunia, which needs no deadheading. And that shines, shines, shines in the nighttime. So just think about using white leaves and white flowers. And so I'm going to end this talk with a few of my favorite plants. And this is in my book. I have a lot more than I'm talking about today, of course. But this is Plants and Planting. And this, isn't this a sweet little garden? She actually, the lady I worked for, she had this somewhere in a different spot altogether, somewhat hidden. And I placed her, and we built that her husband had built. Love that. And this plant in the back is one of my favorites. You see this tall plant? That's called Joe Pieweed. It's a native, and butterflies adore it. And it looks like nothing right about now. And then all of a sudden it takes off. And you can get shorter Joe Pieweeds like Little Joe. There's so many now that grow to maybe 4 feet rather than 6 to 8 feet. But that's a great plant, Joe Pieweed. Look it up. Great native. Another one that I love are blue evergreens. You see the blue weeping blue atlas cedar and blue fescue in the pot. So blue and blue against each other. Everybody loves blue in the garden. Blue is the most popular color in the world. So here we are, Montgomery blue spruce. Deer don't eat that. And this, if you want to know, is another fave. This is Stachy's humalo, which is in the same family as the lamb's ears, but it's Pete Outdoff's plant. That's why it's called humalo, and it has scallop leaves and beautiful flowers, which you don't see here. So Siren Call of blue evergreens. But here's another fave, a real popular one that you can get anywhere, Angelina Stonecrop or Angelina sedum. And what I love about this is it grows with abandon. And when it gets cold, it has this ombre effect. Isn't that great? So it has that orangey going to yellow effect. Love the orange tips. But in the springtime, it's primarily yellow. And you can put it in, you can place this in beds or in rock gardens, anywhere you want. In planters, it looks great in planters. Angelina, can't forget that, Angelina Jolie. Tiger Eyes, Cutleaf, Staghorn, Sumac. Staghorn Sumac, as you well know, is a native, but this was a sport that was found in a nursery. The blue flowers are larkspur. It's not part of the shrub, by the way. This is what it looks like. It's kind of a wild, weedy looking plant, but it's got that lime green leaves, and it grows out with spreaders, so you can just, if you want to control it, just cut them off in early spring. But what's so great about this cutleaf sumac is you could actually put it into flower gardens. So here's a cutleaf sumac growing with very tall purple astilbes. Oh, and lilies, look at those lilies. So it's a great addition both to a flower garden and to a shrub border. And it is a native plant, so it's a nice overall plant to use. Tiger Eyes. And this has got to be my #1 fave shrub, flowering shrub. This is actually in my backyard, my little tiny backyard. Snowflake, oak leaf hydrangea. oak leaf hydrangeas are native to the southeast, so you can say it's native. But this particular one was found in a nursery. And so this is what it starts to look like when it starts the flowering process, which I love. This is what they look like when they're fully in bloom. And then when the fall comes and the leaves turn this beautiful color, this is what they look like. Oh, and then now the leaves will start to turn a very dark burgundy. You probably know that. But isn't that great? Oh, I love snowflake hydrangea, oak leaf hydrangea. Oak leaf. Tolerates half shade. And so with that, everybody needs beauty as well as bread. Places to play in and pray in. For nature may heal and cheer and give strength to body and soul alike. Isn't that true? We need that more than ever. And so there you are. And if you want to contact me, these are all the ways you can. I'm on Facebook every morning, as some of you already know. Serenity in the Garden, Heaven is a Garden, The Spirit of Stone, all my Facebook pages. Instagram, and then my blog. And these are my other 2 books. And with that, here I am. Hello.
Thank you, Jan.
I hope that was good. I've never done that before, and I kind of missed hearing you shout out the answers. I hope somebody did. So, how am I doing on time, Marcos?
We're good. Thank you so much, Jan. That was such a fantastic presentation, and definitely gives us all something to think about as we have more and more time in our yards. Made me think a lot about how I could use some planters in my backyard. I say that intentionally because every time I say that to the Hanover Garden Club, I get a phone call with like, hey, do you want to come pick up a plant? That's the best part about getting to host things for the Hanover Garden Club. We have like time for 1 or 2 questions. If anybody has anything pressing that they'd like to chat, you could either type it in the chat, and then I'm happy to read that question out to you from Jan, or raise your hand if you have that ability. Jen, I always just like to ask, like, what inspired you to go into landscape design and gardens?
Oh, that's a great story, because I grew up in Queens and Brooklyn, New York, in little apartments. And as Lori is here knows, I went to the High School of Music and Art in Manhattan. So I didn't have much contact with plants. But when I was a kid, I just wanted to grow plants on the windowsill. My mother thought it was hysterical. And as when I moved to Brooklyn and I was young, I grew plants in tomato cans on the fire escape. So obviously that's just kind of where I was directed. And then when in college days, I went to Japan to study architecture, and I walked into the Japanese gardens, and that was one of those moments of epiphany. And I went back to the architecture office in Osaka. And, I started designing all the pathways and the bridges, and my boss there said to me in Japanese, he says, "You're not an architect." He said, "You're a landscape architect," which I had never heard of. And he sent me off to a landscape architecture office, and that was it. That's how I got into it.
That's a great story. That's and good to hear. I spent a good 15 years in Queens and Brooklyn myself. So
you know.
Totally.
Brooklyn Botanic Gardens, that was my introduction, frankly.
An absolutely gorgeous Japanese garden. We had a good question, one quick question. What plants are good for a rain garden? And I'll follow that up with, how hardy is the Japanese forest grass?
Okay, Japanese forest grass, New Hampshire. I don't know about that. You're what, zone 4 perhaps? I don't know. Because it's hardy in zone 5. I'm not so sure about zone 4, but you have other options, which are carex, which is also good for rain gardens. Carex is also known as sedge, and there are so many different carex or sedges available right now. Ice dance is a particularly hardy one, and deer don't eat any sedge. So that is a good one for a rain garden. And also marsh marigolds, and sometimes of course, the native cattails, and what else is good? There's a whole list that you can put into rain gardens, but it is a niche unto itself, rain gardens, and there's some great sites on the internet. If you just say rain gardens, the Rain Garden Alliance has a great list of plants. If you go to Rain Garden Alliance.
Great. I think those were the only two questions that I saw come up in the chat, and we're just about 2 minutes under before 1. Susan or Cindy, if either of you would like to say goodbyes or thank you. I'm having the Monshire. Thank you so much, Jan, for giving us this really great garden tour, as well as a nice math lesson, which we always.
Well, I hope I didn't go too fast. I was kind of a little nervous about the time, so I hope I didn't throw too much at you in too short a period.
And I'll just quickly say, for everybody who registered, if they would like to see this again, we did record this presentation, so we'll hopefully have it available online. So I know I could benefit from listening to it again, and hopefully we'll be on CATV as well. We'll send out everybody information to the Garden Club so you can get that information. Susan or Cindy, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, I'll just say thank you, Jan. I knew it was going to be an amazing presentation, and it was. And you've given us a lot to think about and a lot of great gardens to visit if we haven't had a chance to see those amazing places. So keep on doing the great work that you're doing and never retire.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, that's for sure. And yeah, and you can get my book anywhere you want.